Theology would be so much easier if we played by the rules that apply to life in the world. You know, rules like we're responsible only for ourselves, we get our just desserts, we're rewarded for virtue and punished for vice. But Christian theology follows a very different logic, and this is nowhere more evident than in today's theological term, imputation. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Now, to be fair, imputation is not only a theological term, it is also used in the fields of statistics and law, among other things. In its most general sense, it means something like attributing a quality or motive to someone based on their association with someone or something else. You can think of it as sort of guilt by association. And in statistics, as I understand it, and believe me, I barely understand the science of statistics, imputation means something like estimating an unknown value based on similar data. I know that's about as clear as mud, so let me get to the theological meaning of the term and why it's really important to us. In theology, we talk about imputation both in terms of our guilt and in terms of how we are made righteous before God. With respect to our guilt, we talk about the sin of Adam and Eve as our first ancestors being imputed to us simply by virtue of being human. Doesn't really matter here whether you think of Adam and Eve as actual historical figures or as fictional characters whose story represents the human story. Either way, their story defines who we are. Guilty of rebellion against God. Like it or not, we continue to do exactly what they did. We elevate ourselves and our desires above the needs of others and above the will of God, and we often deflect responsibility for our faults by placing blame on others. The flip side of the coin, though, is that the righteousness of Christ is also imputed to us. This is the very crux of Paul's theology. He refers to it in a variety of ways in his letters, but it is in Romans 5 that he makes it most explicit. Both the sin that is imputed to us in Adam and Eve, as well as the righteousness imputed to us in Jesus Christ. I don't want to read the entire passage, so let me hit the highlights. If you want to read the whole section, it is Romans 5, verses 12 through 21. Let me simply read a couple of the snippets from this section to illustrate. Paul says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin, and so death spread to all because all have sinned. Sin was indeed in the world before the law, but sin is not reckoned when there is no law. Yet death exercised dominion from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sins were not like the transgression of Adam, who is a type of the one who was to come." It's a little confusing, but it's where Paul makes it plain that we all participate in the sin of Adam simply by being human. He then goes on to say, if because of the one man's trespass, that is, Adam's, death exercised dominion through that one, much more surely will those who receive the abundance of grace and the free gift of righteousness exercise dominion in life through the one man, Jesus Christ. Paul doesn't use the word impute here, but it is exactly what he means. The righteousness of Christ is imputed to us. That is, we are counted as righteous before God, not because we actually are righteous, but because Christ is righteous for us. He completes the argument, Paul does, by saying, "Therefore, just as one man's trespass led to the condemnation for all, so one man's act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all. For just as by the one man's disobedience the many were made sinners, so by the one man's obedience the many will be made righteous." Admittedly, this may all sound pretty esoteric, but it is actually central to understanding the Christian faith. In a nutshell, righteousness before God involves a level of perfection that we on our own simply cannot muster. Instead, God has chosen to count the righteousness of Christ as if it were our righteousness. His righteousness is imputed to us, attributed to us simply by the grace of God. If the legal definition of imputation means something like guilt by association, then the theological use of the term with respect to Jesus Christ is that we are counted as innocent by association. And that's good news, because left to our own devices, we would surely muck it up. Tomorrow, a term we've encountered before but is worth revisiting: inclusio. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.